Welcome to the Unpacking Sunday podcast, where we take a deeper look at God is speaking to you, to our church, and to the world around us. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's unpack it together. Hello, Michael Perks.
Hi, Luke.
How are you, sir?
Yeah, good. We're distant again today.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We had, an unforeseen circumstance here, so
That's ministry.
that is ministry. Yeah.
Just all unforeseen circumstances.
But we're wanting to be faithful to try and get this episode out on time, so we're Zoom recording, but it's okay. I don't think people would really notice all that much. It does sound a lot sweeter, and it's nice to be in the room with you, but here I'm looking at your pretty face, and we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Yeah. Luckily, Zoom has that touch up my appearance button. That's what I do.
Nice. I don't, so you're just gonna have to. I don't even know which button that is, so you're just gonna have to deal with this mug here. But yeah, cool, man.
Well, happy long weekend.
Thank you.
Weekend. Yes.
How was your long weekend? Did it seem restful to you?
I felt rested on Saturday.
Good.
And I felt rested again by the time I got to Monday night.
Yeah. Good.
We saw some friends twice in the same weekend.
Wow.
That we haven't hung out with for a while, so that was fun.
That is fun. That's super fun.
Yeah. We saw them on Friday, and then we said, why don't you come over to our house on Monday? And so twice in one weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How was your weekend?
Really good. Really restful. We didn't plan a lot. My oldest, Violet, had her wisdom teeth out on Friday, so that puts a bit of a damper on things. But yeah, she was recovering, and we were just kind of at home getting the yard ready for the sun. So that's been fun. So kind of moving things around, getting ready to pressure wash this week. So we're gonna get it all summer ready here. So, and it's coming fast, man. As soon as spring break is over, summer just kind of seems like a barrel roll towards us, which I am not complaining about. So
I am just wondering, where did April go?
Right? Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah. So, and we're going to have a party at your house soon, actually a staff party. So
Ivy is very excited about the church. Yeah, she just the whole church staff is coming here again for a party, and I'm like, yep, that's happening. She's like, that is very exciting. So yeah, she wants to show everybody her bunny. So
right.
Yeah.
What is the bunny's name?
Floppy or Flops.
Flops.
Yeah, so yeah, he's very cute. It's like having a mythical creature in our backyard because he's he's got the little Holland lop floppy ears, and he's pure white. So it's just kind of like you look out the window and you're like, what the? If you saw that thing in the wild, you'd be like, I need to make a wish or something like that, right? But yeah, he's in our backyard. So we let him around in the house, but he does poop everywhere. So there's that.
Oh, shucks.
But you know what? It's the gift that keeps on giving, because rabbit poop is actually a very desired fertilizer. So we just kind of sweep it up and throw it in the garden. And so it's best of both worlds.
Okay. And how's your garden doing then?
Oh, luscious. No, Jamie hasn't quite planted everything, but the soil is ready to go. So there. So, but yeah. Awesome.
So Unpacking Sunday, here we are. We're back in the book of Jonah after Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah.
May 18th already. May's half over, and we are in chapter 2 of Jonah. He just got swallowed by a fish, did a lot of reflecting and praying.
Yeah.
And then gets spat back out of the fish.
Yeah, what a wild story.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's probably one of the more obscure stories in the Old Testament and in the whole Bible, actually, I would think. And it's interesting to me how, it's funny how people kind of throw out the literal word of God rule, especially for Jonah, and they just say it's not real. This is all allegory or whatever. And that to me is just so wild, because like we stated last time 2 weeks ago, that Jesus mentions this, and Jonah is mentioned as an actual prophet in other books, right? It's where is it? Is it Deuteronomy or something he's mentioned, or Second Kings? Second Kings, yeah. Not Deuteronomy, but yeah, it's interesting because I think people kind of roll their eyes a little bit at this big, when people consider this a real actual story. And like we had said, it's the only really narrative that has to do with one of the Old Testament prophets. The rest is all kind of quotes and kind of their words to different, areas and peoples and everything like that. But yeah, it's so interesting. I really really love this book. It's such a short, kind of fun, obscure, interesting story of obedience and how God can literally use anyone in any situation.
Yeah, and I think what stood out to me, like I think we mentioned this on our last podcast, but like how uncomfortable, like of course, being in the belly of a fish is uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Really, like it's not this cartoon thing that we talk about
Right.
sometimes. This is discomfort. Like even I was talking to somebody after church, and there are many reasons, and some scholars would even say like Jonah did actually die. Like this is a
Uh,
resurrection story that we're listening, like reading,
interesting. Interesting.
because he prays and he says like he does say, like we mentioned on Sunday, you brought my life up from the grave. He
Yeah.
does like from Sheol, you have brought me back.
Okay. Wow.
Like he actually was like in the realm of the dead. He says he like
Interesting.
it says he went down to the root of the mountain. Like that's how deep he went.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
sure, perhaps it's hyperbole and he's
Hmm.
praying this way. But how
Right.
else would somebody drown, get swallowed by a fish and spat back out?
Right.
Like, so there are some people thinking like this is actually a story of resurrection.
Wow.
So either way, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And I think it's so good to shed light on this fact that obedience isn't always comfortable. Like it isn't always like check mark, good to go on to the next thing. God will often take a season of our wilderness, and like when we turn to him and we've learned what he wants us to learn, he'll often just kind of put us into this, okay, you're leveling up here into the next situation you go, of kind of outgrowing your shell, being in discomfort. So yeah, it's I think oftentimes people believe that it's gonna, eventually things are gonna be easier, this is a life full of blessing or whatever, and it's like, no, God's like, I want to mold you, I want to shape you, and that isn't always fun.
And isn't it interesting that this is like Jonah had to learn to rely on the grace of God in this moment for
Hmm.
himself. But
Hmm.
this is probably what he was so exhausted of. And actually, he'll say in the end of the story, that's why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, is because he knows God is going to be gracious.
Yeah.
Whole point is that first, Jonah had to receive and experience the grace of God.
Right.
He had rebelled against God quite dramatically, and then he turns back and he is met with grace and kindness. And isn't that the case for us as well? So often we kind of can get annoyed at what God is doing or who he is or what he's up to until it applies to us. Then it's like, oh, thank God for your grace and your kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a something to be reminded of even in our obedience, is the grace of God and the kindness of God, that he would still like, I can follow God and I'm going to mess it up probably again soon, pretty soon, maybe
Hmm.
today, but I'll be met with grace. And I love the picture of like, literally, we talked about this in Romans, right? Is that idea is that we stand before God soaked in his grace. That's like the image that you get in Romans,
Yeah.
in this, like we're sinking deep in the grace of God. And now Jonah, it's a different kind of analogy, but he's like swallowed by a fish. He's literally swallowed up,
Hmm.
and that's God's grace upon his life.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because your new favorite song lately, Luke, it talks
Mm.
about, it's not about striving, it's not about
Right.
earning, you'll never deserve it, but it's that God has, because of Jesus, just thrown us into this great grace that we now walk in. It's kind of wild.
Hmm.
That even, yeah, someone who's like as rebellious as Jonah, that God would like meet him in this impossible situation.
Hmm. Even that, I think, is something to highlight upon too, because I think oftentimes we approach the way God wants to work with us from our own understanding of relationships with people, with our parents, and it's like, we wronged you, so we're in the doghouse, or we're in your bad books, and like God is so quick in his grace and so like Jonah literally was like, I am leaving your presence. I'm getting as far away from you as I possibly can. And then even risking people's lives to disobey and then finally coming to a realization on him, his moral compass kind of went the right direction. But I think we often will think that. It's like, I have wronged you. I have sinned. I have fallen. Now I'm out of your favor. I'm out of your, but God really just calls us like in this situation, like, he's like, leave it, dive into trusting me. And I can and will immediately use you, and I think just that image of grace is so profound. One thing that's been kind of blowing my mind, this idea of, who were the Assyrians? Who were these people that Jonah hated so much? I think in my personal walk, we look at the we look at the book and just think, okay, well, this is a city, so it can't be that bad. They live in a city. Nineveh's a city. They probably. What does that mean, right? So it's like, but like, I think this having an understanding of why he despised these people is so important too. Like these were pagan, sworn enemies of Israel and the people who ruthlessly attacked and killed over and over and over again and took people as slaves. And like, it's like, I think it's really easy to kind of come into to create this image that they were a civilized people because they live in a city, so that's why he didn't, but he just hated them because they were enemies of Israel. But it's like, I think Jonah had he had a valid reason for despising these people, which just goes to show how profound God's grace is. That why did he want to save this city? Because they were so far from him. They were an example that God could use of, if these people can turn to me, anyone can see how good and how faithful and how real and how true I am. So yeah, I think that's just something that I've been kind of diving into, this idea of, is not falling into my own. I read this, oh, Nineveh, he didn't like them, but they lived in a city, that kind of thing. But just like, no, I've been doing like a little bit of like reading about the Assyrians, and it's like, no, these were bad guys. These were bad guys, and they were worth not liking. And he almost had, it's like, I think if we can change it in our own culture, who would be a people group or a society that are so unjust that, it's like, this is like looking at a group of like, I'm going to go to Nazi Germany and try to save these people who are killing Jews, that kind of thing. And that's what God's calling me to, and so it's like, that kind of seems like a shocking thought of like, this is a people group who, God's forgotten about because they're so evil and so awful. But that's like kind of on equal ground of like, this is who God, he's like, I died for these people as much as I died for you. And yes, they are deeply fallen. But yeah, so anyways, that's just been something that's been kind of rocking me about reading through Jonah.
Yeah, and the fact that in the midst of all of that, because I think depending where you live or maybe your upbringing or how you look at the world, those like people groups, those evil people are going to be
Mm-hmm.
different people for each
Mm-hmm.
person who's maybe listening. But the wild thing is that whoever they are to you, it's that God is still calling people to go and reach those people, that he still has grace for them, that God would see fit not to write them off, but to call Jonah to go and do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means he's probably doing that today, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are entire groups of people that Christians probably have written off, and God is still in the midst of what he's accomplishing in his church, calling people to go into these different Nineveh that
Mm-hmm.
probably exist in our world still now.
100%.
And so, what do we do with that? Like, how do we, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm listening or I'm showing up on Sunday and that's me. Like, God's calling me to go and do something about this. Obviously, we should respond in obedience. But what if it's not me? But I just know in my heart there are people that I kind of count out, like the Ninevites. How
Right.
do I, how do I walk this out? How do I support what God's doing? How do I live a life of, like we've talked about on Sunday a few weeks now, a life of repentance,
Mm.
a life of obedience, even when I'm not that person?
Yeah, I think I look at my own heart, and that's such a challenging point because I feel like there obviously is people groups, even political stance groups, it's like that kind of or we live in such a woke society where people are so anti-church, and there's such fragile cultural lines that we have to walk to be careful not to offend, and that kind of thing. And it's like the oftentimes I think as believers we'll just kind of be like, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to tell those people about God's love, or I'm not going to share that with this person because they've made it pretty clear that they're, like they support this or they support that or they support this person or that. And so I think it's really easy for us to do that. And this story really sheds light on how God's calling us to not put blinders on, to keep our heart and eyes open to whomever, even the people who we think that's a hard no for me, or as Randy would say from American Idol, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. Yeah. uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. How
So
about you,
it's
Mike?
what are you asking me?
Well, no, I just think like all in this lines of, have you found yourself just kind of writing off a people group and not thinking that God could be calling you to share your love with that and stuff. It's just an easy thing to fall into. It feels like.
Yeah, I think for me it's like maybe the opposite, where you feel a bit ill-equipped
Mm-hmm.
to do what God's asking you to do. And so I think that that's another thing probably that we wrestle with, is like God is calling people particularly for a certain time and a certain person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that he equips us even along the way, because Jonah doesn't even really understand the grace of God that he's about to preach about until maybe this week, like what we just talked about.
Right.
He recognizes that God is gracious and he pulled his life up from the pit.
Right.
And it's like, just be obedient to where God asks you to go, and he'll equip you along the way.
Right.
It he the word says you are equipped for every good work that he calls you to.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll meet you
Yeah.
even if you don't have this moment what you need. You will by the time you need it, so long as you walk in obedience to what God is asking you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think even for me, as we're talking about this, I think it's really easy to kind of believe that God's going to use you in a certain way because of your skill set or because of what your preference is, And I look at me and I would assume that God would wanting me to reach the world through music,
mhm.
and how I'll almost turn off this idea of like, no, you wouldn't use me any other way. And so I'm waiting for and expecting or hoping or thinking, if you're going to use me, it would obviously be through music, through the things I'm passionate about or whatever. But that is not often the way it works, or not what God's called us to. That isn't what obedience looks like. Like, use me, Lord, as long as it says something I prefer, like that kind of thing. And so that's a real challenge in this too, is that we can often think, well, God has equipped me with this and this, so that's obviously how he's going to use you. And then we kind of write off, or this openness to be used in a way that could be completely uncomfortable for us or completely out of our scope of preference, So that's super challenging too.
Yeah. And as we'll see later in the story of Jonah, it is all God's grace, what he does, how he takes what you offer, how he uses you, and the results that are going to come from that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in God's hand, all of
Mm-hmm.
it. Right. And so that will even become annoying for Jonah later, like when he preaches and the people repent, and then he's kind of annoyed at God still that he did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right. And then Jonah in the last chapter has to learn this whole lesson that, hey, it's all been God. It's up to God where he gives mercy and grace and where he doesn't, and it's all
Yeah.
up to him. And so we have to remember that our job is faithful obedience, and that's it.
Yeah, it's so funny that it's like, not to give any spoilers, but Jonah does kind of have this kind of like indie film ending where it's
Yeah,
not like he's celebrating
yeah,
the victories, right? He's just kind of annoyed and sad. And like,
yeah,
I can't even remember, there's a scene where he's like under this tree and he's just kind of
right.
angry, right? Right? It's like, it's so super, so not Hollywood in a sense. Oh, it's funny. But yeah.
That can be us, right? So I guess pressure's off a little bit, as you go wherever God asks you to go.
Totally.
He does the work. You
Yeah,
just walk obediently.
for sure. For
So
sure. You have my yes, Lord.
mhm.
Yeah. Wow.
That's what he does. So where are we going after this? We're going into Jonah is about to arrive in Nineveh. That's where we're at.
Mhm.
So if you tune in again next week, we'll be there. And then in a couple weeks, Luke, we have, I think, at least a dozen baptisms on June 1st.
Whoa, so fun.
Yeah, so we'll just be doing baptisms all morning long.
Just dunk fest.
Yeah, it'll be so fun.
That is so fun.
So maybe if there's people listening who want to get baptized, now's your time to sign up.
Yeah.
Because we'll do that. And then it's Father's Day, and Linda Herman is here from Thailand. We got a fun couple weeks coming
Yeah.
up.
So good.
So
Yeah, we'll talk about it all here on Unpacking Sunday. But
and soon we're gonna have our Is It True series. People
yeah,
are for that.
can't wait. Can't wait. We're gonna do a bunch of pre-recording episodes, so that should be fun. So we got to get people to get their questions in or their thoughts in as soon as they can.
Yeah, we got a few, but still send them in to general office or Unpacking Sunday at crcfchurch.com.
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Well, have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you at church. We love you.
You.
Okay. Unpacking Sunday is a podcast of Cariboo Road Christian Fellowship Church. If you're interested in more information, please check out our website at www.crcfchurch.com.